Let me tell you something you already know. The world ain't all sunshine and rainbows. It's a very mean and nasty place, and I don't care how tough you are, it will beat you to your knees and keep you there permanently if you let it. You, me, or nobody is gonna hit as hard as life. But it ain't about how hard you hit. It's about how hard you can get hit and keep moving forward. How much you can take and keep moving forward. That's how winning is done.
Welcome to Successful Dropout. This podcast is for the outliers, the innovators, the rebels, those that dare to dream and act on their dreams. I'm your host, Kylan Ginger. Join me as we find out what it takes to drop out, grind, and succeed. Hey, just wanted to take a quick moment to tell you about Audible.com, an app I use on almost a daily basis because it's an incredibly affordable and convenient way to learn and read on the go. You'll love it for, I'm sure, all the same reasons you love listening to podcasts. If you are new to Audible, go to successfuldropout.com/book to claim your first audiobook free when you sign up. After that, it's only $15 a month and you can cancel at any time. That $15 gets you one book credit and you can use that to download any audiobook you want for that month, regardless of price. So it's very cost effective. If you decide you don't like the book, you can simply exchange it for another book free of charge. So again, if you are new to audible.com, go to successfuldropout.com/book to get your free audiobook through this podcast. You can also see my personal library and reading stats there because I posted some screenshots. Again, that is successfuldropout.com/book. What is up, Successful Dropouts? Get stoked because today on the show we have Gautam Bhargava. Gautam is the founder of Peer.com, a peer education marketplace that connects top high school and college students to their peers for in-person tutoring session. He's a high school dropout on a mission to create more opportunity within our education system and help students find their passion. Previously, he launched Satis.org, how to start a startup program for young founders, and was a partner at Ankorhem, a product design agency based in Dallas. He's 19 years old, and Gautam, that's the intro I have for you, man. But tell us a little bit more about yourself and what you do.
Thanks, man. Well, first of all, thanks for having me on the podcast. I'm super excited. But you hit the bio spot on. I'm a high school dropout. I'm originally from a small suburb of Dallas called McKinney, Texas. I've pretty much lived here my entire life. Grew up in an ethnically Indian family and had a very kind of non-traditional route to my career, which is kind of ironic given that I had a very traditional schooling growing up. I did the entire, focus a lot heavily on academics because of my parents, and not sure how it happened, but I ended up dropping out and starting a few companies, and that's kind of what I focus on doing right now. So that's pretty much me in a snapshot.
Awesome, man. And you're walking around where at right now? I'm noticing some background noise and stuff.
Well, I just moved into a new apartment here in Dallas, so we don't have Wi-Fi set up there, so I'm actually sitting outside at a Starbucks. So you might hear some construction noises or some background noise, but hopefully Starbucks elevator music isn't too distracting.
No, it's funny because I can hear it a little bit, but no, it's more authentic, man. You're a busy guy, and for people listening, Gautam and I tried to connect last week, and we got really into a really good conversation, and then audio kept cutting out. We were having all sorts of difficulties, so it's amazing how much you depend on Wi-Fi, man. And but hey, I'm curious. I guess, what is it about your background and maybe your upbringing or your experience as a kid that made you entrepreneurial or made you be okay, with taking the risk of starting different companies and putting in that hard work? Is there anything you can think of that you can point to?
Sure. I think that's a great question. It's something that I think about a lot, which is, how the hell did I end up where I am? It's such an unconventional turn of events that kind of led me to this route. Like I previously mentioned, my parents were super into my academics. They put me I went to a public school in the suburb I lived in. went to middle school, went to high school, I was always really absorbed in my grades and my academics, and my parents always, had a very big push and focus on that. It was always about being the best and top of your class, and then going on to a great university and getting an internship and having a career at a company. And somewhere along that line, things kind of got mixed up. What I think it was for me, when I kind of reflect on this and think about it, was somewhere in my high school career when I was, really, really absorbed into trying to get into a good university. One of the things that, schools always tell you is trying to differentiate yourself. And, one of the things that I was increasingly interested in was this idea of starting a company. So kind of ironically, I got into entrepreneurship to get into school, even though in a really weird turn of events, it led me to leave school. But my journey started in high school. I was really into academics. I kind of, wanted to start something to kind of differentiate myself on college applications. And while that was happening, I got a chance to meet a few really incredible people who had a big impact on my life. One of those people was a kid named Jed. He lived locally right in the suburb I used to be in. We went to the same elementary, middle, and high school. But Jed had taken a completely different route in his, academic career. While I was preparing for college and, getting ready to do applications and focusing on my grades, Jed had actually dropped out in his sophomore year to be a photographer on a presidential campaign for the 2012 elections. So this was fairly recently. This was about 5 years back. So he was, I believe, 15 when he dropped out, 15 or 16 when he dropped out. And we got introduced through a mutual friend, and I had coffee with him. And, I don't remember much about it, but I do remember how I felt during that conversation, which was, here I was, my entire, upbringing, very, very academic focused. And I had just met someone who had kind of completely, threw that in the garbage and kind of decided to take their own route in life. I was always kind of told that, the only way to be successful in your career is, to get good grades, to get a good degree, to get a good job and, climb the ladder. And here was someone who I just, kind of met by chance, who had taken a completely different route. He dropped out. He was a photographer on a campaign. And, I could tell just by the conversation I had with him that, the work that he was doing on this campaign he was very passionate about it. He was really into photography. It was something that he, kind of fell in love with at a really young age. And he was fortunate enough to get an opportunity that allowed him to, turn that passion into, something he could make money on really early. And so it was just kind of a huge culture shock for me. This, small Indian boy, super focused on school, meeting, a white guy who's, kind of had a completely different approach to life and different upbringing. And I got really close with Jed. I ended up actually starting a company with him, which was Peer. He was actually one of my original co-founders. And we ended up growing really close. I just kind of fell in love with what he had done and how he had kind of turned his passion into something he was interested in. And it just kind of forced me to kind of reflect on, why I was doing what I was doing for school and, why I wasn't pursuing my passion just the way Jed was. And, that leads me into one of the things that I became increasingly passionate about, which is, I felt really boxed in our education system today, which was, it's pretty messed up. I remember growing up, specifically in high school, and just thinking about how messed up it was that students are ranked against each other. It's like, when you're in the system and you think about it, it's just so normal. And now that I'm out of it and I kind of reflect back on, this moment, this turning point in my life, this inflection point, I kind of think about what led me to even start thinking about leaving the system. And, the fact that our system today just kind of boxes in creativity, it ranks students against other students rather than creating, a collaborative environment for learning. It all kind of leads to students kind of being forced down this very traditional path when, as you probably know, learning and education is very, very subjective to the person. And It means, if you ask someone what education means to them, if you ask 100 people what education means to them, you get 100 different answers. So, You know, why is it that I was getting pushed down this very conventional path that, you know, I was pretty much being forced to take by my culture, my parents, and, you know, I just met someone who'd completely thrown that away and said, hey, you know, I'm not really interested in taking this path, and kind of did their own thing. And that just kind of inspired me. I got really, really into entrepreneurship at that point, and really, really passionate about this idea of trying to understand what's wrong with our education system today and how we can do a better job of teaching students. And that's just, I guess, you know, that's what's led me into, you know, building what I'm doing today. And I guess the turning point in how I got into entrepreneurship.
Dude, I love that. And I feel like that's a great transition into, you know, talking about status and peer and stuff. But,
Sure.
you know, I love what you said about, you know, about kind of competing in a closed system and everybody learning in different ways. I mean, have you ever read anything by John Taylor Gatto at all? Are you familiar with him at all?
I have not.
Definitely, I think it's somebody that you would look up to and really value his writings, as well as for anybody listening. But I mean, just the other day I was reading a chapter by his in his book, Dumbing Us Down, and he is talking about how people are always looking for very like specific systems and processes and kind of like a one-size-fits-all method for
Sure.
everything from like you know, large-scale economics to politics to, you know, education.
Right.
And building communities. And, you know, he was just like, that's just not the case. You know, everybody's born different. We're all individuals. And because that, everybody's, speaking specifically of education, everybody's going to learn differently. Everybody's going to be interested in different subjects and excel at different things. And
Absolutely.
It also reminds me of this quote, and I think it was Isaac Morehouse who said this on his episode on Successful Dropout, but he said something like it was his kind of aha moment when he decided to drop out of college, and it was when he was sitting in a class and looking around and realizing that he could roughly expect to be about the average of everybody who was, you know, in that class with him.
Right.
And he said it was depressing, and he knew it was meant for more than that. And so that's what kind of, you know, launched him to build what he did. But
absolutely.
So tell us then about, I mean, was satis.org, was that the first thing you kind of got involved
Sure.
with? Or just take us through the story of how this experience then shaped what you then began to build.
Sure. So, you know, for me, at this point, I think I was 16, 17 years old when I met Jed, and I kind of decided, you know, I really want to start experimenting with entrepreneurship genuinely, not just for the college application, and really understand the process and how it was going on. As you can imagine, for any 16 or 17-year-old out there, it's really, really hard to kind of find your own direction in starting a company. It's even hard to figure out, you know, what is the next step you take once you've decided you want to pursue entrepreneurship. And, you know, I had kind of this idea of, you know, the first step I wanted to take was, before I really invested a lot of time into this, and before I, you know, made a decision to do anything but the conventional path that I was, you know, taught to take, you know, I really wanted to understand what I was getting myself into. One of the ideas that I kind of thought of to figure this process out was, you know, what if I started a program that brought in a bunch of different entrepreneurs and investors and attorneys into a summer course, basically, to teach other students about entrepreneurship. So it was kind of strategic, kind of ironic. I was trying to learn about entrepreneurship, so I put together this program to teach other students about entrepreneurship, and kind of used it as a mechanism to really learn to to kind of jump into building something by myself, while at the same time meeting a bunch of different resources that would help me along my journey, all kind of share around this mission of teaching students about entrepreneurships. So, you know, that program ended up being Satis, and the point of Satis was basically to find really, really young founders or young entrepreneurs and have them come to this summer program. It was 3 weeks long, and teach younger students about what building a company is like and what entrepreneurship is like. So What I did was, as a 16-year-old, I didn't have the first idea of, how to put this together. I first of all discovered a really, really incredible video course by Y Combinator by Sam Altman called How to Start a Startup. And when I was 16 or 17, I remember watching it and kind of just, watching every single video and learning as much as I can. And basically in this course, Sam Altman invites a bunch of successful founders from the Valley, and they kind of talk about every single aspect of starting a company objectively and just kind of giving advice about it. And I kind of used that as a foundation to build on this program. And I decided I was going to do it. I went on LinkedIn and just tried to find a bunch of really cool people I wanted to build it with. I ended up reaching out to, I think, 3 or 4 really, really smart young people who had kind of done some incredible things early on. So it was, Jed was involved as well. It was me, Jed. There was a student named Rami who used to run a program called Project Best. He went to the Thomas Jefferson School of Science in, I think, Virginia, or in the DC area.
Project what was it called? You cut out for a second.
It was called Project Best. It was basically a STEM camp for students. He was,
cool.
This guy was 15, 16. I don't even remember how I found him. I just remember I reached out to him on LinkedIn and kind of told him what I wanted to do. And he was interested, and I reached out to another kid named Justin, who was this 15-year-old kid who had dropped out and who was building WordPress website. And he was actually, really good at it and had a kind of a decent following. And basically I put together these 4 or 5 individuals, and they kind of helped put this team together to start this program. And long story short, we worked on it for 6 to 7 months, and we actually did the program. It was the summer of 2015. We had about 15 students. All of the people, who were involved in putting this program together flew down. We all, had a great time. We, put this program together. We learned a lot. We invited some really great speakers and mentors, and, taught basically 15 kids how to, get involved in entrepreneurship and start a company. And of course, the people who organized it as well, we learned a lot too. So it was a really great experience. It's kind of my first, experience with entrepreneurship, and there wasn't really any magic behind it. Kind of just decided one day that we were gonna, and we did it. And we just kind of figured everything out on the way. I mean, I think it was kind of like I didn't have a specific mentor who guided me through the process, or I didn't have, any specific resource to teach me how to do it. It was just something that I guess I thought would help me, and I wanted to do it. And just something I kind of just jumped into and got passionate about and ended up doing.
I have a question that I think you might have enough experience to answer, but I think it could be interesting. But do you think that entrepreneurship is something you can teach? And I guess if so, what aspects of entrepreneurship do you think you can teach, and which ones do you think you can't, I guess? What are your thoughts on that?
Sure. Well, this is a great question, and I get asked this question a lot, specifically by students who are running companies in school and thinking about dropping out.
Yeah.
Hey, give me 1 second. There's a bus going past me, so it's pretty loud.
Sure.
All right, I'm back. It's such a weird place for a bus to go. All right. So could you repeat that question one more time?
Yeah, basically just wondering, in your opinion and based on your experience, do you think that entrepreneurship is something that can be taught? And I'll say that, prefacing it, I should have prefaced it first with the fact that I just did a survey for the show, and actually there's a large majority of our listeners are actually really interested in, at least someday, building their own business. And so I just think that'd be something that'd be really interesting to discuss based on your experience with Satis.
Mm-hmm. Well, this is something that I get asked a lot, especially running this program. And, I should give you some context about the purpose of what Satis was actually about. The purpose behind Satis was, less so to give, these students the direct resources to start a company. It wasn't about giving them capital or technical know-how or anything like that.
Okay.
It was a lot more about giving them inspiration. So it was a lot more about putting, 4 or 5 really young people who had kind of taken initiative early on and showing these kids that, you don't have to wait till you're in college or after college to do something great. And that was always kind of the purpose behind the program. But using that as kind of an introduction, or as kind of to kind of answer your question, I think I'm a firm believer that entrepreneurship cannot be taught, and that what the purpose that more people or that schools should be focusing on is less so about empowerment and more so about inspiration, because I think innately entrepreneurs are people who are opportunistic, people who can see an opportunity and have enough direction and enough self-confidence to go out and take it themselves. And, especially when we think about entrepreneurship these days, I think it's something that's incredibly lionized. It has this, I guess, false photo that, a lot of people, equate entrepreneurship to starting a tech company, for example.
Right.
But really, all entrepreneurship is seeing an opportunity and taking it and making money out of it, and that's what I think, when I was, even before I decided I wanted to, pursue entrepreneurship, even before I really knew what entrepreneurship was. I remember when I was in middle school and I was in 6th grade, what I would do was I would buy a big bag of Jolly Ranchers from Sam's Club. There had maybe like 250 or 300 Jolly Ranchers in there, and I would sell like 5 or 6 for $1, and I would make like 30-40 bucks off one bag and spend $6 on it. That was before I even knew what entrepreneurship was, or even remotely had an idea that I was going to pursue it long term. It was just something that I had thought of, something I just ended up doing. So, I always think about it, and I think part of this question is, are entrepreneurs made or are they born? Is it nature versus nurture? I think just like any other thing, entrepreneurship is really subjective to the person who wants to pursue it.
Yeah.
I'm a firm believer that it can't be specifically taught. You can't really teach a person that. You can't teach that inner drive. You can't teach that idea of, taking an opportunity and monetizing on it. That's, that really comes from within, and you can definitely inspire someone to do that, but you can't teach it.
Do you think somebody might get better at that? Would you view those as maybe skills, though, in some way, where if somebody really has a desire to do that, the more they kind of practice and just keep throwing stuff against the wall, I guess, the better they might get at it?
That's a good question. Yeah, I think to an extent, yes. I think as you deal with failure more and more, you get better at taking it, and you get more comfortable with it. And that leads you to take bigger risks, which leads you to try and capture bigger opportunities. And I guess you could kind of equate failure to being a better entrepreneur, although I think even it still takes a certain amount of self-drive to even try something or take that big risk.
Yeah.
And I think there's a lot of aspects of entrepreneurship that can be taught. You can teach people about how to incorporate a company. You can teach people about, the process of building a software product or running a Scrum sprint or whatever it might be. But the idea of seeing an opportunity and putting together a solution and a vision and going out and building it, that's something that, I don't think that can be taught. And I think, I hear a lot of my friends from high school going on to, really great universities talking about how they want to pursue entrepreneurship after they get their MBA or, finance degree or whatever it might be. And, it's really, really hard to take them seriously when they say things like that, because, you don't, when there's an opportunity out there as a person, you really don't need any, I guess, certification or any degree like that to go out and take it. You just kind of do it. I don't know how to describe it. It's like, entrepreneurship really is different to every single person, but, I really think that you can't teach that self-drive, but of course you can teach other aspects of building that company. Yeah,
that's interesting. I guess when I hear somebody say, I want to be an entrepreneur, but I got to go, earn my BA or something first. Yeah, there is definitely a part of me that it finds that pretty hard to believe, or finds it hard to believe that they might even have what it takes to be an entrepreneur, because all the successful entrepreneurs I know, all the people I've interviewed on this show are the kind of people that, man, if they want to be an entrepreneur, it doesn't mean, they're looking for an opportunity right away, and once it presents itself, they take that risk, even if part of that risk is having to drop out of school in order to take it. So, yeah, I can definitely agree there.
And it's kind of interesting because when you kind of think about people today and how they kind of get off, one of the really, really popular things nowadays are MLM schemes. And I remember when I was first starting my company, I got approached by some guy who said he was an entrepreneur, and really what he did was he was just working on an MLM scheme. The idea of how MLM schemes inspire people to take initiatives is really, really interesting. Mm-hmm. And the fact that there are people out there who are inspired to do more, but are taking the wrong direction, it's entrepreneurship is a really tough nut to crack. I think it's the perfect balance between inspiration and empowerment, and figuring out, I need to take this initiative and capture this opportunity, but also having the ability to set your own direction and know what's right and wrong. And that does take a lot of iteration and failure. But, at the end of the day, I think it's a really, really tough thing to teach anybody.
Yeah, and it's interesting. I'm sitting here trying to think of the difference between teaching something and then to a subject, basically to a person, and then that person learning something. And I'm trying to think of examples of things that are really difficult for, say, of something that might be difficult for me to teach you, Gautam, but you could still learn if you had kind of the drive and the passion for it enough to just go and figure it out yourself. Because the thing about entrepreneurship that I like is it's such a, like you kind of said, it kind of encompasses this broad sort of category of everything from like the big tech entrepreneurs of like Mark Zuckerberg and Bill Gates and Steve Jobs to, like, I would argue more of the intrapreneur concept, like people that are employees maybe inside an organization, but are finding different opportunities in that organization to grow the company without asking permission, taking the initiative. And that's entrepreneurship too. In some ways, I think even writing a book is entrepreneurship, because I think the essence of entrepreneurship is solving problems. And so if there's a problem to solve and a place in the market for maybe a book on a certain subject, and you take the time to, I think even that's a form of entrepreneurship. So I even wonder, if, because I would agree, like saying entrepreneurship can be taught, like you can put 30 students who have like, I want to be an entrepreneur, put them in a class, and 3 months later they're all like successful entrepreneurs. Obviously I don't think that's the case, but I wonder, if somebody can still learn entrepreneurship if they have, like you said, kind of the inner drive and the passion and the curiosity, enough of those things to be able to pick up on opportunities eventually, maybe more than they did previously. Yeah. I'm just thinking out loud, but do you have anything to add to that?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, sure. I mean, I think there's a few things. First thing to mention, when we ran that first status program, we had 15 students. I think about 2 of those 15 students actually decided they were interested in pursuing entrepreneurship. Excuse me. So, it's, for me, that program was as much about telling people, hey, maybe entrepreneurship's not for you as much as it is telling people that entrepreneurship is for you.
Yeah.
And I think, it really is an interesting conversation. I think a lot about, why do some universities spit out better entrepreneurs than others, or why do some universities have more of a, quote unquote entrepreneurial culture than others do.
Right.
And at the end of the day, I think a lot of it is just finding out what you're interested in, and then surrounding yourself with the resources and the inspiration that you need to start a company. And one of the examples I'll give is I think Stanford has produced some of the best, entrepreneurs and some of the best companies,
Right.
Google, DoorDash, the list goes on. And I think part of the reason for that is I don't think Stanford does an exceptional job of teaching entrepreneurship. I think what they do is they do an exceptional job of cultivating a great pool of resources for inspiration and empowerment to where students can go out and meet entrepreneurs to get inspired, or go out and talk to tech companies to learn about a specific problem. I think, it's less about teaching entrepreneurship than it is about building a community or building a culture.
Yeah.
I think the most successful universities or programs that, build great entrepreneurs or build people who end up doing great things. I think what they do is they try to focus on building a culture of inspiration and empowerment, and let students kind of do what they want with that culture, and not, they don't put them on a specific path. They say, this is all available to you. For Stanford, you're kind of hard, you're very close to the heart of Silicon Valley. You can do pretty much what you want here. It's up to you to take the initiative and go out and do it. And I should mention that another really interesting thing that I think about a lot is really when we think about successful entrepreneurs, we have to understand that it's like 0.00001% of people, right? Like there's such a small fraction of people who end up pursuing entrepreneurship, and an even smaller fraction of people who end up building a successful company. Mm-hmm. So, it's also important to mention that there are, the majority of people aren't, even the majority of people at Stanford or any of these really entrepreneurial universities, they still don't take the initiative to go out and build a company. It still takes a very self-driven, self-motivated person, someone who's naturally opportunistic, to go out and utilize those resources and go out and build something great.
Yeah, I love it, man. It's interesting about Stanford because you're absolutely right. And what you were saying about community, it brings it back for full circle to what we were talking about earlier with John Taylor Gatto, and there just be, if you're in a community where, or an institution basically where the belief is not that there is one size that fits all, I think you're better off. Because
absolutely.
Yeah, and I was talking with a guest yesterday, and I'm really excited for her episode to come out, but she mentioned 3 things that I think are important for everybody who's pursuing entrepreneurship to find, which you kind of alluded to in some ways. But there's always the kind of the right amount of risk, that you have to take as an entrepreneur. There's of course the hard work, just massive amounts of effort, and then I think there's meaning, and what you were saying about like pursuing what you're curious about and finding things that they just get to you, and pretty soon it becomes the reason you wake up every day. Finding meaning, and I think those 3 elements, the risk, the hard work, and the meaning, are incredibly important to foster an entrepreneurial community. And one other thing I wanted to point out for our listeners too is just the difference between, we're talking a lot about entrepreneurialism in the sense of like starting a company. One thing we talk a lot about on the show too, though, is just having an entrepreneurial mindset. You can have an entrepreneurial mindset and not start a business. Oh,
absolutely.
When we're talking about the slim percentage of people that actually start successful companies and stuff like that, that's definitely true. I mean, it's tough getting a business off the ground, much less it surviving for 5+ years. But I think everybody can learn the mentality of an entrepreneur, and that's what I'm really trying to get at with this show, and what I feel like I love what you were doing with Satis. I feel like it's a lot what we're doing with Successful Dropout, which is like, here's a glimpse into what this kind of mentality and this kind of life is like, and it's either for you or it's not.
Absolutely.
But I do want to talk about Pure, though. Pure's got me really interested in what you're doing there, and so what, how did that come about, and what's the why behind that? What do you guys do basically?
Sure. So just to kind of give you a quick little elevator pitch, what Pure is basically what we do is we source really, really smart high school and college students, and we connect them to their peers for tutoring sessions. And really the purpose behind what Pure does is we want to give more students we want to share more experiences with students. We want students to, meet different kinds of people. We want them to, learn from a peer who could potentially inspire them and empower them. And I think it's kind of a continuation about this idea of inspiration and empowerment in our education system. And for me, just kind of talking about how it started, I put together this program for SATUS, and, this idea around my head about, a big part of my journey was I got inspired by meeting a peer who was Jed. I kind of talked about him a little bit earlier. And that idea of, the power of just one interaction with someone who had a different life experience and different upbringing and culture had made me question my own upbringing and eventually led me to kind of choose a different path.
Yeah.
And that idea of peer inspiration just was really ingrained in me, and something I continue to take with me as I, continue my journey. And it was something that I thought was so powerful that, it could be something that could potentially help inspire and empower a lot of other students. So really kind of how peers started was really, it was kind of on the very, very kind of the DNA of my journey. It was about meeting a peer who inspired me and me wanting to take that experience and provide it to potentially millions and millions of students with the purpose of having them kind of reflect and think about what they want to do with their life, and hopefully find what they're passionate about and choose what they want to do with their life. So that's just, I guess, the quick elevator pitch of what Peer does and the purpose behind it.
That's awesome, man. And so how long has that been going on then?
So let's see. So I did SATUS in the summer of 2015, and that was my junior year. So it was my junior year going into my senior year. After I did SATUS, I got just so kind of inspired by what happened at the program, and I was just kind of in this place in my life where I was able to put together this program in 9 months and build a team and actually launch something. When I was still in high school, and I guess I was just kind of in this area of probably too much self-confidence, and ended up as soon as I turned 18, I made the decision to drop out of high school. Put my papers in and left the last day of my junior year. So I dropped out, and then September 2015, really August 2015, as soon as SATUS ended, the program finished, I said, you know what, I had a really great experience putting this program together. I actually want to build a company now. And I actually, I talked to Jed about this, and Jed and I were actually the original founders of Peer, and we both kind of started this company knowing that the experience we had with SATUS was something we wanted to take further, and something we had a really, good time doing and learned a lot from. I learned more from putting that, summer program together than I had in, the 10 years I was in school. I learned more about communicating with people and putting together a team, and, pitching and selling to parents and customer satisfaction, and, the list goes on. And, I learned a lot of practical skills more than anything else, and I wanted to continue learning those practical skills. So dropped out, started in September 2015, and kind of been running with it ever since.
Now, when you say practical skills, really, I want to talk a lot about Peer a little bit more, but what do you think, though, is the difference between, like, the practical skills and the time, when you were learning and building something outside of school, and then when you're in school? I mean, because obviously you've excelled outside of school, obviously, but then you were talking about how you were really excelling inside of school. I mean, it sounds like you understood how to study to the test and stuff. And so I'd wonder, if you could explain in your words, what's the gap there? Like, what's the difference between how you're learning and progressing and gaining skills in school versus in the real world?
Well, I'll give you a little bit of a backstory on this, because I have a pretty interesting kind of experience I had. I had mentioned in my junior year, I ended up dropping out. I was super into my grades. I had a, near perfect SAT score. I was really, really into it. My parents always pushed me to, focus hard. They signed me up for super expensive tutoring and put me in a really expensive prep program. But, there was a really kind of critical, I talked about Jed kind of being that personal shift in myself about what I wanted to do with my life and finding my own passion.
Right.
But there was also an incident, I guess, in my academic career that really really made me reflect about the problems in our education system. And what that was I think early in my junior year, I got caught cheating on a test. And, it sounds crazy. And I was really young. This was before I learned a lot of stuff. And basically, I got caught cheating on this test. Here I was, I was ranked in the top 10. I was really into school. And I got caught cheating on this test. And it was,
Can you like elaborate a bit more? Do you mind? Like what exactly were you doing? Or
Sure. So
I love stories
basically,
like that.
Oh yeah, and I love telling it. It's kind of a controversial topic. I talk about it a lot, but it really is a critical component to why I think our education system was broken. Basically, I was in a program called IB. I was in what's called the diploma program, which is in your junior and senior year of high school. They basically put you through kind of this rigorous 2-year program that they really delve deep into a lot of different skills. And I was in biology, so I had this class for biology, and let me just say, I had no interest or passion for biology whatsoever. So, long story short, the teacher had set this test for 2 weeks in advance. I was always the kid who was a procrastinator, but always ended up acing the test, and the kids hated me, and it was weird. So, long story short, I go to this test. I haven't studied for it at all. I go through the test. It's pretty easy. And there's one question at the end of the test that I can't figure out. And, and basically, I think it was like 15 questions. I had 14 questions filled out. I was confident that I was happy with this answer. And there was one question at the end of the test that I couldn't figure out. And I was really dead set on getting 100 on this test to make sure that, I was ranked the highest and I had the best GPA, and, you know how it goes. Yeah. And I basically what happened was I pulled out my phone under the table, and I looked up the answer, and I got caught. I got caught doing it. And long story short, obviously the teachers weren't really happy. It was just a bad experience, but
did they call into question your entire academic career? Like,
you wouldn't even imagine the kind of. I mean, if you think that was bad, imagine going home to 2 Indian parents who have invested so much time and resources to get for it all to potentially come crumbling down on some one bullshit question. Anyway, so I kind of went through this, and I got in a little bit of trouble, mostly from my parents, and went through the whole you're a disappointment and all of that, and it really, really made me reflect on, why the hell was it so important for me to get 100 on this test on a subject that I knew I didn't care about and I had no interest in pursuing in the future, all, just to get that 100 and get that better GPA. And the thing that really ticked me off was I was in this program at this school and I had got cheating, but there was cheating everywhere. And this is also another really controversial topic that a lot of people don't talk about, but pretty much in every single high school and every single competitive environment, there's a lot of cheating that goes on. Right. So I took the fall for getting caught cheating on a test. I go back to school the next week. There's probably 10 kids cheating on the next worksheet or the next test who just don't get caught. Right. And really, it kind of sucks to say it, but the reason, getting caught on that test was the best thing that ever happened to me, because it really made me think about why I cheated, why everybody else cheated. And that really led me to kind of get a really deeper understanding of the problems with our education system. And I got, so passionate about it that I ended up dropping out and tried to fix it. But, getting caught cheating on that test, really, really, showed me the bad parts of having an incredibly competitive environment at school. And that was kind of, I guess, the point in my academic career that I was like, wow, the system is really broken. And I think there's actually a really great quote by Neil deGrasse Tyson where he talks about cheating on a test. I don't know it exactly. Basically what it says is that if a student cares more about the grade than the actual learning, then there's an issue with the way that we're teaching students.
Yeah.
And that was probably the quote that really like made me dive deep into the purpose of my education, the purpose of why I was getting a diploma, why I wanted to get a degree, you know, what I wanted to do with the rest of my life. And it ended up, you know, that was kind of the point, you know, after status had happened and after I had that experience and got that self-confidence that I knew I could really do something by myself. I kind of took all those experiences, the meeting I had with Jed, the cheating experience, the experience that I had with status, and made that decision to drop out and really wanted to build something to help solve that problem for other students. And that's how I guess Peer was born. And that, you know, the purpose of Peer is really to help solve that problem a lot more in, you know, just something that I wish I had when I was in that situation, which is I wish I had, you know, I wish when I was going through that experience, I had, you know, someone who was a little older, or kind of a mentor who could kind of walk me through what it was like in their shoes or in their experience. And, you know, maybe things would have gone differently. I don't know. But that was just, I guess, the end result of what I wanted.
Yeah, no, I love it, man. Thanks so much for telling. I mean, that's just an awesome story.
Yeah.
I'm sitting here thinking about, like, nowadays when I don't know the answer to something, I Google it on my phone. That's
right.
like what I do.
Right.
But what's
Right.
amazing, though, is that you're able to be so, I guess, introspective about it. I mean, you're able to kind of draw from all these different experiences a curiosity and just a different path in stuff. And I wonder, like, are you able to, because I feel like that is such an essential skill, the ability to be introspective like that. But
sure,
for a lot of people, it can be elusive. I mean, did you journal? I mean, were there any kind of mechanisms that you used to actually think about this stuff, think through it?
It's so funny, and I want to get back to your original question from the last one as well. But you can I do the weirdest thing, and you can ask any of the people I work with, any of Peer's employees or tutors or anything like that. Basically, anytime I have a thought or a kind of point of reflection, I text myself. I do have a journal and I write in it quite frequently, but I mostly use that for, you know, creative thinking for Peer. But for personal stuff, I text myself. I always have my phone on me. So like every day I'll just have like 10 different text messages to myself, and it's super weird, but it helps me so much. You know, just kind of thinking about. It helps me document what I'm thinking, but, you know, more importantly, it really helps me. You know, if I want to learn about things that I was reflecting about, you know, the other day, because you know, I might have forgot about it or whatever, I can just scroll up on my phone and look at it, and it's one of the life hacks that I use. It's actually helped me a lot professionally and personally.
Huh. I really like that, and I kind of relate on a really weird level, because I think I have a super weird system too, which it involves texting myself, and also the tasks or the to-do app on your typical iPhone. But
Yeah.
I do it backwards, and it's not till now I'm just thinking how weird that is, but like I'll text myself tasks that I know need to be done, but I'll journal thoughts on the to-do list. Actually,
that is funny. That's really interesting.
But I like it because they're thoughts
really
that I have thoughts, and I'm like, okay, I don't have time to think about that, but I want to come back to it later, and so I'll put that on my to-do list, and then eventually I'll look through and I'll kind of analyze something, or, you know, just kind of mull through something, and when it's done, I, you know, click the little circle and it's out of there, right? So that's kind of why I like it, I guess. It's like thoughts for later, but
I might have to do that, man. It's the funniest thing when I'm like scrolling up on my phone, kind of looking at these notes, and, you know, there's certain like notes I see, I'm like, what the hell was I thinking about, or like, what does this mean?
Right.
And it's probably because I mix in to-dos with thoughts and reflections. It's a mess. I probably need a better system, but that's super interesting.
Yeah, I do that too. But no, I just think regardless of what method you use, it's the process that counts. That at least you're you know, being mindful of your thoughts, honestly. And I think I would encourage everybody listening to just do that, especially the younger you are. That skill of introspection is so important to work on. Start today.
Oh, absolutely, absolutely. And originally you had asked this question about what aspects of the education system do I think really I guess turn people away from the entrepreneurial mindset. I think this is a great great way to get back to that. Was one of the things I remember specifically. One of the most archaic things about our education system, and this is really, really weird to think about, but I find it really interesting that we still call our teachers by their last names. And I know it's like one of those things that you're just so used to doing that you never really think about it. But when when it was so weird to me, and I have a great story that you'll be able to relate with, because one of your actual podcast guests was kind of the person who made me think about this. I remember in my junior year how weird that I thought it was that, I was close to being an adult at that time. I was 17. I was about to turn 18. Mm-hmm. I was, doing a lot of things on my own. I was making my own money. I'd made some money from Satis. I was starting my own things. But every day I had to go to school and talk to my teachers as if I was 6 or 7 years old, and basically do whatever they told me. It's this idea of no autonomy whatsoever. And I just right. I'm baffled that we still do it. And I understand that it's a sign of respect. And there are some, of course, cultural implications to why we do it. Mm-hmm. But from strictly a environment or culture standpoint, it's a really weird thing to do. And I remember this was so weird to me. I'm used to always talking to, teachers and adults by their last name. Yeah. One of the first people I ever reached out to for Satis to invite them as a speaker was a guy named Michael. Michael. And it was basically all I did to find Michael was I went on LinkedIn and I searched Dallas startup community, and Michael's all over the place. Oh, yeah. Like he really is the face of the startup community here in Dallas. So obviously his name popped up, and I had no idea how people get in touch with people. So I just pulled up a LinkedIn message, sent him a request, pulled up a LinkedIn message, told him what I wanted to do. And he had his assistant set up a meeting. I drove, I think, an hour to downtown Dallas. I used to live in a suburb, it's kind of far away, to go and meet with Michael. And I remember the first time I ever met him, he was in a t-shirt, jeans, and flip-flops. No, he was in a t-shirt, shorts, and flip-flops. And we were sitting at this coffee called Flying Horse Cafe. And all I remember is he was the most casual person that I had ever met. And what was so weird to me was this was the first time ever, professionally and personally, that I was talked to as a peer. When I had this conversation with Michael, we were on a first name basis immediately. He really talked to me as if I was a peer, more so than an adult talking to a child, or an experienced veteran talking to someone who's just coming into it. Right. It was a peer-to-peer conversation, and it was, I just remember feeling like really, really incredible about that meeting, just because, for me, of course, I was at a high school 2 times, and he had his own really untraditional path to where he's gotten to right now, and he's just a really, he's a nonconformist, to say the least. Right. But that experience I had with him of meeting someone who was really, influential and inspirational, and having them talk to me, as a peer, as opposed to talking down to me like a teacher might talk to you if you want to have a conversation with them. It just really made me think about the environment and culture we have in today's system. And I think I kind of went on a tangent there, but I think one of the issues that we have in our education system today is just a cultural issue. Mm-hmm. It's the fact that we don't create a comfortable environment for students to go pursue what they want to do. We don't allow students to have their own voice within the school. It's a feeling, you feel very, very subjected. And I think for me, it was just, the first time I kind of, got elevated to a culture and community where I was treated like an equal. I immediately felt a shift in the way I started to think about myself and the way I started to think about my career. And I think culture in itself is one of the really is one of the things that really inhibits creativity and autonomy in today's system.
Yeah, totally. I totally agree with that, and yeah, love hearing about Michael, man. For people listening, his episode I think is a few back. Just type in Michael in the search bar at successfuldropout.com. He came on, and we had an amazing talk, and I think he's somewhere on the road now in like a camper on his way to build a 700 square foot house and live completely off the grid. I mean, the guy is incredible. But yeah, what you're talking about, I know exactly what you mean, and again, I talk about Gatto a lot, but he really talks about this, and it's this freedom versus this permission mentality, where in the school system and what you're talking about with teachers and calling them by their last names, they're kind of these, I don't know, you're indoctrinated into this system, this institution that teaches you to rely on people who are more, quote unquote credentialed than you are for meaning and direction and what to do next and stuff.
Absolutely.
And man, it's I think it's the exact opposite of what I think should happen. And I love that you're building a solution to that with Peer. Essentially, it sounds like
absolutely.
Most of your experience is leading you to where you are now. Is the whole reason why you built Peer. You're building a solution for people like yourself. Yeah, I love it.
Yeah, I think to kind of expand a little bit about specifically the what problems that I felt really needed to be addressed immediately. One really important point to make about the education system is there's a culture issue, and I think a real important reason why there is such a big culture issue today is that our entire schooling system is very, very teacher-centric. And a lot of people might be asking, why is that bad? Really, in comfortable learning environments and successful learning environments, the best way to teach someone is using a very student-oriented approach. There's a few different pedagogies that there's a lot of debate about in the education system. Competency-based learning, of course, Khan Academy uses mastery-based learning, the idea that students shouldn't be able to continue on to a topic until they've mastered it. If you look at the education system today, there's a lot of factors in why it's fundamentally broken. If I had to say what the number one reason that I think our education system is, and what's causing a lot of these issues, is that we are teacher-centric instead of student-centric. And let me give you an example of that. I'll give you two examples of that. The first example is, why do we have classrooms with ratios that are 20-1? So in Dallas, the average teacher to student ratio is student to teacher ratio is 22-1. So for every 22 students, there's one teacher, one faculty member. So why does that happen? If you think about it, really, it's a resource issue. We don't have enough teachers per school. We don't budget enough to have enough to personalize learning. You have smaller class sizes or one-on-one sizes. However, because of recent technical advances, recent shifts in the way that we think about pedagogy and the way that we think about learning, that problem doesn't have to be there anymore. I mean, that's been a problem for the last 50 to 100 years. But it no longer needs to, right? Because we have the idea of digitalization, of moving content to video. We have the idea of the shared economy, of peer-to-peer. There's a lot of different reasons why that doesn't need to happen today. And that teacher-focused culture causes a lot of these, the issues that I'm talking about. And I think, unfortunately, it's a really tough problem to solve, which gets me into my second point. It's hard. It's really the reason that there hasn't been a large shift in today's really schooling process and system is there's these things called teacher unions, which I am a very, very, very I'm very, very against teacher unions.
Right.
So basically, there's this fact, and I tell it to people when I talk about education all the time. Did you know that that teachers are compensated based on seniority as opposed to outcomes?
Yep.
meaning that the older teacher you are, even if you're the worst teacher, that you are going to get compensated better because you've been a teacher for longer.
Yeah, tenure.
There's also exactly tenure, and there's a very, very interesting statistic. Bill Gates gave a really great talk about teachers, and he dropped the statistic that kind of really shifted my view on this, which is there was a research done that measured whether seniority, the amount of experience you have as a teacher, makes you a better teacher or not. And what that study found was basically after 2 years of teaching experience, you kind of stagnate in your ability to teach or in the outcomes of your students as you become a more senior teacher. So what that basically means is we can't change the system because teacher unions have created this system of tenure and of compensation based on seniority as opposed to outcomes, which naturally means it can't be student-centric. And on top of that, there is no benefit in having a system like that, minus the fact that there's so much political momentum already from the teacher unions.
Right.
It's the worst problem to have in our system. And it's, this is there's a lot of studies and statistics done about about this problem, and I think it's really interesting, especially with our new education secretary, and a lot of conversations happening today about the right view of education, the left view of education, and whether or not we should focus more on privatization or continue building on the public system. I think it's going to be really impossible to make a huge shift within the public system.
Totally.
Solely because of teacher unions.
Right.
Solely because of teacher unions. And that was the number one problem that I wanted to solve. A lot of people ask why I didn't make Peer as a nonprofit, why, it's not a product within the system today. The most important thing to me is to get away from the system that's causing the problems and have a completely, fresh perspective on it. And we use a mastery-based pedagogy at Peer. All of our content is designed to be completely student-centric. The teacher, the culture that we create in every single tutoring session is one of compassion and servant leadership, or basically serving the student that you're working with. I think we've created a much better model in the way that we teach students that unfortunately is pretty much impossible to replicate in today's school system.
Right.
Which is why which was really one of the biggest reasons why I decided to start Peer, and kind of one of the political reasons that it's built the way it is.
Yeah. Well, dude, I think you're dead on, and I share your point of view where trying to change the system from the inside out, I think, is near impossible, or at the very least, I think it's a lot of wasted time and effort. And I think the best thing to do is to protest by essentially building other solutions, like yourself. And if anybody were to ask me what I think the future of education is, or what I think the future of higher education is, I would simply just say it's more options, because we're starting to have companies like Peer.com pop up, and Praxis and Mission U, and Uncollege, and all these different resources. And then I think there's Alt School by a Google employee. They founded that.
Alt School is awesome.
Yeah, and then Make University, Make School. Yeah, Make School. Like all these great solutions. I think that and I think next 5-10 years we're just going to see more of those pop up, because it's just such a big broken system. The best way is just to build around it, quite honestly.
Yep.
But Gautam, we're running out of time here. I've got 2 more questions for you, man.
Perfect.
And I'll let you go. And shoot, we didn't get a lot of the stuff to a lot of the stuff that I wanted to. We might have to have you on a second time here. But first question here. What parting advice do you have for any of our listeners who are thinking of dropping out, thinking of doing more of the entrepreneurial thing, but they haven't quite made that step yet?
The number one advice I have for people is to do nothing. I had the fortunate experience of kind of growing up in, I went to a lower income school, and one of the things that I realized is in today's system, when people kind of think about their future, nobody really takes a minute to pause and think about what they want to do. They don't even take a minute to pause and smell the roses of any accomplishments they've made so far. When people are kind of asking me about what they should do with their future, go trip just wherever you want. You can be in an apartment, in your apartment. You can go to India and do a 3-day sabbatical if you want. It doesn't matter. But just like take your time and think by yourself. No outside, inspiration or nothing from the outside, and just kind of like reflect and think about what you want to do. And just to add on that, I think another really important part is make sure that when you think about your career, think about it both from the perspective of your personal happiness and also from your professional fulfillment. And I think those are the two most important things when you think about your future, is make sure you're fulfilled, you have purpose in what you're working on, but make sure you're happy. I might be kind of non-contrarian with this view, but I don't think that those are connected whatsoever. I think you can have purpose without happiness. I think you can be happy without purpose. In fact, I see it all the time. I think the real good entrepreneurs are the ones who find purpose and happiness.
Yeah, I'm trying to remember really quick here. There's a kind of a Venn diagram that Derek Sivers, he's the founder of CD Baby, has when thinking about questions like this, and he talks about, find something that is useful, useful to other people, because a lot of times there's a lot of fulfillment and purpose in that. Find something that makes you happy. And then also find something that's smart. You have to think, logically, is this a smart move? Am I going to end up in a good place? Is there actually opportunity here? And so if you can end up in this intersection of useful, doing something that's useful to yourself and the world, making the world a better place, that makes you happy and that's smart, then you're on a pretty good track. So totally agree with that. Do you have any parting advice for people who are probably more where you are, Gautam, who are already on their entrepreneurial journey? Any parting advice for them?
I think I would just repeat what I said earlier, which is just I think that a lot of entrepreneurs convince themselves that they're happy and convince themselves that they've found their purpose when and that's what they present externally. But oftentimes, even people at the stage of work that I'm doing right now are just incredibly unfulfilled. I mean, I think everybody should just take a day of the week to reflect, or take an hour of the day to reflect. I mean, I think my advice to anybody is just spend some time with yourself and think. Doesn't matter what stage of life you're at. Doesn't matter, what stage of company you're building. None of that matters. Just take some time to think about your future and reflect at all times.
Yeah, I feel like you cannot stress that enough, man. The introspection and just being alone. Sometimes I do a lot of hiking and backpacking, 100%. And I'll tell you, the times when 100%. I have the most clarity are when I'm just out in the mountains alone. And that doesn't have to be the exact mechanism you use, but something similar. Just like you said, get rid of the distractions and stuff. But hey, Gautam, what's the best way for people to connect with you?
Best way to connect with me would just be to send me an email. My email is gautam@peer.com, GAUTAM@peer.com. That's PEEYR.com. And I'm pretty much available to chat whenever.
Okay, and we'll have links to all that in the show notes. And Successful Dropouts, you've been hanging out with Gautam and Kylan, and you are the average of the 5 people you hang around the most, so I think that's pretty cool. You're learning what it takes to drop out, grind, and succeed. For everything we talked about today, head over to successfuldropout.com and type Gautam, Gautam again, which is just, I think that's a kick-ass name, man. Type that into the search bar, and the show notes will pop right up. And as always, stay hungry, stay foolish. Guys, if you feel like discussing anything we talked about today, or if you have a random question about something else, please get in touch with me. Go to successfuldropout.com, and there's a Talk to Me section right at the top of the page there. I absolutely love hearing from you guys. Some of you know I've emailed back and forth like 20, 30 times over a few months with you guys, and I absolutely love it. I always respond, so please definitely get in touch. Also, it would really help a lot if you went to iTunes and left a 5-star rating and a positive review. It really helps the show out a lot, helps us rank, it helps people. There's just more social proof there. And plus, I just like to hear from you guys and know that you guys like listening to the show. So if you do that, that would be awesome.